Hello, Grace, and welcome back to Cover to Cover. Today is April 28th, and we are covering 2 Samuel 15 all the way to 17:14. If you recall where we left off last time, is it seemed that David and Absalom had gotten along, that they had reconciled, and Absalom even bows his head and kisses David's feet. In today's reading, we see that that is not so. Absalom sits at the gate of the city, and it says that he steals the hearts of the people of Israel by listening to their complaints. He then stages a revolt to steal the kingship, and David has to flee for his life. Pastor Steve wrote his dissertation on the dangers of charismatic leadership, and Absalom is a biblical example of what that looks like in practice. Two things are true simultaneously. First, Absalom is a manipulative opportunist who is attempting to steal the throne of his father, and David's kingship has become compromised by his own moral failure. The kingship is legitimately vulnerable because of David's faults. Next, David flees Jerusalem. His barefoot ascent up the Mount of Olives has been compared to Christ's ascent to the cross. This is very common in the early church fathers. In an act of humility, he sends the Ark of the Covenant back to Jerusalem, saying, if I'll see it again, if it's God's will, he'll bring me back to Jerusalem and I'll get to see it again. In all of this, he acknowledges his own failures, and he does not seek to clothe himself in the appearance of divine favor. He's going to allow God to work his way through it, and he's going to accept whatever happens. Next, we have the story of Ziba and Mephibosheth. Ziba is a former servant of King Saul, and he accused Mephibosheth, Jonathan's crippled son, of disloyalty to David. David had protected Mephibosheth, Jonathan's son, as an act of covenant loyalty, as an act of devotion for Jonathan, his best friend. But here, Ziba is accusing Mephibosheth of betraying David. The issue is intentionally left unresolved in this passage. We only have Ziba's claim in the text, and the reader is left wondering if David is being rash or discerning when he makes his decisions here. We're not going to learn more until we get to 2 Samuel 19. So we're kind of left in narrative suspense. Next, a man named Shimei, a relative of King Saul, begins to curse David, shouting at him and pelting him with stones. He says David is a man of blood and is getting what he deserves. And David responds with humility at this point. Jewish and patristic commentators both agree that this is one of David's finest moments after his fall. Rather than lashing out, he just decides to accept this as he says, maybe God has decreed that this man should curse me. And so I'm just going to leave everything in God's hands at this point. Next, we have the wise man Ahithophel. Ahithophel was a counselor to King David, and he was so wise that to receive counsel from Ahithophel was compared to receiving the wisdom of God. Ahithophel counsels Absalom to publicly secure David's own concubines, and this is an explicit ancient Near East declaration of power and authority. He is publicly laying claim to the kingship, and this is another fulfillment of Nathan's prophecy to David. What you did in private shall be done in public, or shall be done in broad daylight. Next, David plants a spy in Absalom's court, and a young man named Hushai is the spy, and he's able to defeat the wise counsel of Ahithophel by persuading Absalom to go with a completely different plan. In this verse, we get a perspective of how God works in David's life. Remember that in the story of David, we don't have any real miracles, yet God is portrayed as being immanent and active continuously throughout the whole circumstance. We know that David's enemy has the wisdom of Ahithophel on his side, and the text tells us that God defeats Ahithophel's wise counsel through Hushai's appeal to Absalom's vanity and his fear. In summary, 2 Samuel 15 through 17 show the consequence of David's own actions as prophesied by Nathan in 2 Samuel 12. David's kingdom is collapsing from within, and his own house is falling apart. Absalom's revolt is not random. It's the narrative of consequences of David's own sin, and this gives us pause to reflect on how our own failures may cause intrinsic self-defeating sin, self-defeating consequences in our own lives.